folks, as I understand it, we are here this morning for resentencing in case number 18 CF 1592, State of Florida versus Denise Williams. I did have a preliminary discussion with counsel as to just the logistics of this morning. A couple things I wanted to address before we get started. There was a motion to have me enter the order vacating the conviction and sentence on the charge of first-degree murder. I believe that that is an appropriate thing to do, and I have signed the order and I'm handing that to the clerk. The other issue that we had is whether or not to reinstate count 3, which is the accessory count. I do not intend to address that this morning. My intent is to proceed with sentencing as to count 1. We will address count 3 at another day, and of course I believe that means that I will not be including that in the score sheet for this sentencing. Also, before we get started, I did want to inform the parties that again, I was not the judge that tried this case, but I have reviewed the court file in this cause and the file and pleadings to date, and all the hearing transcripts and the transcripts of the trial. I've read and reviewed the mandates and opinion of the First District Court of Appeal, and I have reviewed all letters that were submitted on behalf of Ms. Williams, not only those provided to me, but also those that were provided to Judge Hankinson at the time of the original sentencing. I have reviewed the 2019 pre-sentence investigation, and I have, for purposes of today, discounted and not considered anything relating to either count 2 or count 3, which are the murder and accessory charges. I have also reviewed the defense motions and defense sentencing memorandum, and I have also reviewed letters that were provided to me this morning by the State Attorney's Office from the Kirkland family. I don't know if that covers everything I've reviewed, but I wanted to let you know that I think I've complied with the Florida Rules of Criminal Procedure and done an extensive review. So with that being said, is the state ready to proceed?
It is, Your Honor. Just one clarification as to the count, the accessory after the fact reinstatement. Are you going to permit just arguments to put on the record? And I understand you.
No, I'll let you argue. I'm not. If we need to address that today as far as argument, I'll let you do it, and then I'll decide. I mean, as I see it, there's already been a verdict on that, the haze in the barn on it, so to speak, and it's just a matter of is it appropriate to reinstate under the circumstances and in light of the First District's ruling. So we'll go from there. But if I reinstate that, the only downside would be that we would have to come back for a separate sentencing on that.
Yes, sir.
Y'all see it that way? Yes, sir. All right, very good. All right, so having asked if the state is ready to proceed, is the defense ready to proceed?
The defense is ready, Your Honor.
Okay. And then has the state prepared a score sheet that would be only as to count 1 in light of the reverse?
I have, Your Honor.
Reversal as to count 3. And,
I'm going to go ahead and provide you both simply because of the fact since you're going to be ruling on that later on, but the top one is the one for me.
All right, very good.
And both of them are shown to counsel.
And I was going to say, Mr. Ponovan and Mr. Way, y'all have both seen this?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes,
We reviewed.
Right.
No objection as to the guideline range of counsel indicated on the score sheet for today's sentencing.
Okay. So as to, as I understand it, working under the sheet that I'm going to be using for today, the lowest permissible sentence would be 21 months and the highest would be 30 years, correct?
That's correct.
All right. In light of the circumstance, the way I see it, we do have a jury verdict of guilty as to count 1, that we have been up to the First District and we've come back, and we are now to the point of doing the sentencing as to count 1. In light of the other things being thrown out and not being considered today, does that change our costs and fees? No, sir. So with that, I would not have to address costs and fees again today?
The only thing I could think of, Your Honor, is if there were costs and fees associated with count two, of course, those would have to be vacated.
Right.
Otherwise,
All right.
I think that's right.
I would agree, but I think the count two, I think they're going to be the same, if I'm not mistaken.
All right. Ma'am, what are you showing for costs and fees right now? 2625, and that breaks down as to what? Okay. And the $2,100 fine is for? All right, y'all agree that's the case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. All right. All right, well, that being the case, would either side wish to be heard further before the imposition of sentence? And the way I intend to do this today is I intend to hear from the defendant first, followed by the state, and then give the defense the last word. All right? Oh, and then before we start, Mr. Padova, the other thing, just for the media, there was a request with regard to Ms. Williams' daughter as far as not showing her image or broadcasting her under Marcy's law. It is my request that we respect her privacy if we can do so, and I've talked to the lawyers about that. And the lawyers have any objection?
No, sir.
Don't let me from the state, Your Honor. However, I do believe the media has the right to be heard during that
No,
situation.
I understand that, and,
Yes, sir.
And if anybody wants to raise that, they can do that. But again, my preference is that we proceed ahead right now. Mr. Padovano?
Thank you, Your Honor. We have 5 witnesses. The first 3 will be Denise's sisters, Darla Cosso, Deanna Lamb, and Deborah McCraney. I'd like, if it's okay with you, to call them all up to the podium with the idea that Deanna Lamb will speak for the group.
Very good.
Your Honor, are you going to want them in the middle?
I think that if there's going to be them up together, there's probably more room right there for them to stand together.
Take this on.
For me, it's whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay.
And I will tell you, I mean, I know that we're trying to wear our masks as best we can. I have taken mine down for right now, and I'll probably pull it up at times. I think it's important, just from a sense of justice, for people to see the face of a judge who's conducting a proceeding. And if you feel it's important for me to see your face now, I'm certainly fine with that. I don't want to preclude that. I will tell you I've had all my shots.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, well, good morning, Judge Carroll. My sisters and I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. First, we would like to say that our family loved and will always love Mike Williams. He was a member of our family. He was Denise's husband, our niece's father, our brother, and a son to our parents. For my son, Mike was his very best friend. Everyone in this room who knew Mike knows of their bond. Bubbles was the name that my son gave Mike, and Mike is loved and missed by our entire family. We grew up in a loving home. Our parents taught us respect, compassion for others, a strong work ethic, importance of education, and most importantly, faith and love for God. From an early age, Denise had a passion to improve the lives of those she met. She raised her daughter with these same values, just as she and Mike had planned to do. Denise's family, friends, and co-workers know her to be generous, positive, gracious, compassionate, hardworking, and humble. These are character traits that she's been able to rely on and share in her current condition. We love our sister. We believe in our sister. We support our sister, and we are very proud of our sister. We are anxious for Denise to come home where we can assist her with her future plans to improve the lives of the women in the Florida prison system. Many that I like to say that we've had the opportunity to meet, talk to, and we are very passionate about helping these women. We respectfully ask for the minimum sentence of 21 months, and we thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank y'all.
Your Honor, we would next call Carla Daniels, a person who is a longtime friend, colleague, and coworker.
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Daniels.
Thank you for letting me speak. As I say, my name is Carla Daniels, and I have known Denise Williams since high school. We really didn't become friends until around 1994 when we started working together, and we were work friends for quite a while. And then in 1999, we both had daughters at the same time, so we became closer friends. We were living through, nighttime feedings and all that kind of stuff together. Over the years, we became really close friends. Denise is one of the kindest, most genuine people that I know. She's always willing to help her friends and coworkers. She's the first one to send get well cards or thinking of you cards and creating care packages when people are in the hospital or their family members are in the hospital, or just when they need encouragement. As a manager, she was always making sure that her staff not only were doing their work, but that they were doing okay in their personal lives. If they didn't look like things were going okay, she would sit down and say, is everything, how's it going? She was always trying to help people in any way possible. My children, who are currently now, have a son who'll be 18 next week, and my daughter's 21, they consider Denise their second mom. They knew that if they had a problem or needed help, that without a doubt she would come and take care of it, or be able to, love them unconditionally. Even if they were wrong, she would help them get through it. This has even stayed true while she was in prison. My daughter recently graduated from nursing school, and that's stressful. She would be crying and in tears, and she would send Miss Denise an email, and Denise would be able to calm her down and say, you can do this, you can get through this. And she would even send encouragement through when she talked to her daughter. She would pass it on to, tell Meredith she's doing okay, she can get this done. She, did not, even though she was in a difficult environment, she was still trying to help us out. My son, who was, a young teenager when she went to prison, he asked to go see her, and we went in once, and he had to touch her, hug her, make sure she was okay. But he said, Mom, I can't go back again. She said, I can't see her in this place because I just want to take her home. She is a wonderful friend in person. She would have been on the top of my list if something had happened to me and my immediate family. She would have been on the list to take care of my kids and to raise them. In fact, just this last week, we were cleaning out my in-laws' house, and we found a list of people who were allowed to take my kids to the doctor if my husband and I weren't available. I'd forgotten Denise was on the list. She is a good and caring person, and I don't know how else to say it. This clearly demonstrates that, I thought she's a dependable, good, kind, caring person. Over the years, Denise has done all kind of volunteer work she did prison ministries years ago. She's volunteered in orphanages, and she's not the type of person that just goes and does this kind of thing. She makes connections, and she's still in contact with people that she met in these conditions over the years. Even now, when we have something coming up, we ask her to pray for us, and she's very diligent and asks the people on her, the girls on her floor, and they're praying for things happening out in the real world. Denise always talked to Ansley about Mike over the years. Her house had pictures of Mike on the wall. He was not forgotten at all. I worked with her when Mike disappeared, and she was not the same person after that happened. She was just so withdrawn and quiet. In fact, that's when we became the closest friends. I made a point of making her get out of the house, come do stuff, take the girls to the playground, to the beach, just to get her out of the house. And that's when we really became very close friends. Denise has quietly lived her life while she was here in Tallahassee. She was always being scrutinized by the public, by the media, law enforcement, everybody. But she raised her daughter. She raised her to be an independent, kind, loving girl. And Denise just tried to live her life. She would see a lot of ugly things written about her. Kids would say things to Ansley. You would hear all kinds of things. And she didn't run away. She stayed here so that her daughter would be around her aunts and uncles and the family that loved and supported her. She didn't live a lavish lifestyle. She was very careful how she spent money. And the public's perception of Denise was so wrong, it was laughable. What I would read would not be what I saw day in and day out working with her 40 hours a week and how things went along. The media, the state's attorney, their portrayal of Denise was the exact opposite of reality, because I lived that reality with her. All this boils down to the fact that Denise is a good person who loves her daughter, friends, and family. No matter where she is, she strives to help the people around her. This can be demonstrated by how even when she was incarcerated, she had no hope of getting out of prison. She was still helping the ladies that she worked with. She was teaching them the GED. She was excited to be able to help them and to do something for them. So I'm proud to be Denise's friend, and I'll always be a friend, and I think that she needs to get out of prison. It has no help for anybody for her to be there. Thank you.
Mr. Padua?
Thank you, Your Honor. Now I would like to ask Denise Williams to come up and make a few comments to you about the case.
Very good.
Judge Carroll, thank you for your time today. Thank you for reading the letters from my family and friends. Thank you for listening to my sisters and for listening to my daughter when she comes in, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I stand before you today convicted by a jury of a heinous crime, conspiracy to commit murder. I understand that you will be sentencing me today based on their decision, but I do want you to know that I have never and would never want anyone to be murdered, not even the people that want this for me. What I am guilty of, however, is great moral failure at a time in my life where I chose to make reckless decisions that affected everyone around me, and for that I'm truly sorry. These years away from my family and friends have shown me many things about myself that have been hard for me to face. I've spent most of my life caring for myself and my loved ones, but wondering why I never seemed to have real joy or lasting happiness. I had been taught to put others first, and I had been taught to give to others. But I realize now that I only gave out of my excess, and I only served others when it was convenient for me. I did love my friends. I do love my friends and my family. But I believe that other people had the same opportunities and support that I did, and that if they did not, that somehow it was their fault. These years away have opened my eyes to the truth of my selfishness and pride that I did live in most of my life. Thankfully, though, it's opened my eyes to the needs of those around me. It has been both heartbreaking and humbling to hear stories from each precious lady that I have met in prison and that I've had the privilege of spending time with, listening to their stories of trauma and pain, which began mostly in their early childhood. These ladies were given no opportunities growing up for a successful future. They had no one to truly love them, no one to care for them, no one to guide them to be successful adults. There was even a lady, when I came back from prison last night, they asked her if she had anybody to call, and she said no. Being able to serve these ladies in prison with the skills and abilities that God has given me has been joy beyond words. I've had the honor of starting up a GED prep class to educate as many ladies as possible to help them reach their goal of just a high school diploma. I've been able to serve my dorm daily by managing and directing the IBLP curriculum in the JOY program. I've also had the great opportunity to develop training materials for an upcoming stewardship training seminar that we're doing, leading all the ladies in. I'm extremely thankful for these opportunities to see the needs and to serve in these capacities. However, I am well aware that no amount of good deeds can bring my husband Mike back, and no amount of service to others can stop the pain for everybody who knew him. There's nothing I could do to bring Mike back to his grieving mom and to his brother. There's nothing I could do to give my daughter her father back. If I could trade my life for his, I would. Mike was a loving husband and father. He loved his parents. His dad was his hero. He loved his mom, he loved his brother, he loved his friends, he loved his job. His boss and that family, they were family to him too. He had more people that loved him and that still do more than anybody that I've ever known. And everybody who knew him knew that he loved his little girl more than anything in the world. For both of them, I'm striving every day to turn this nightmare into something good. These years in prison have allowed me to find my purpose, which is serving incarcerated women and doing everything I can to help them not return to prison. I strive to honor Mike and our daughter every day by meeting the needs of the women I live with, by sharing with them my story, my failures, and my bad choices, in hopes that they will make better decisions to go on and live successful lives and to be productive members of society. Today, Your Honor, I humbly request a sentence of 21 months. I also make a commitment today to you, Your Honor, to my family and to myself, that I will honor Mike's memory by fulfilling my purpose to serve incarcerated women to the best of my ability each day of the rest of my life, both inside and outside of prison. And I thank you very much for this time and for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. White?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Oh,
Your Honor, I have a brief argument, but I think if Denise's daughter is ready, maybe it would make more sense to have her come and give her statement first.
all right, very good. Mr. Harrison? you
May it
ready to
please the
proceed?
court, Your Honor. Ms. Ansley Williams is here and would like to make a brief statement on her mother's behalf.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Judge Carroll, for allowing me to speak with you today. I know my mother and got to know Brian Winchester, the man who killed my father. I came to understand the relationship between my mom and Brian. There are two key things I ask Your Honor to consider about their relationship from my personal experience. First, there is simply no way my mother would conspire with Brian to kill my father, because my mother would not choose to purposely cause me pain to endure the emotional pain of his passing. She could not bring herself to do that, as she did the opposite by keeping his memory alive on a daily basis. She always wanted me to meet a man with the same ideals that he had. He loved me and my mom more than anything, and every day I still felt his love in my house through my mom. My mom made sure he was never forgotten and always made me feel his love. She has shown all during my life how much she cares for me and would do nothing to hurt me, even being my most supportive person these past almost 4 years. Second, as I got to know Brian and saw his actions daily as he was a figure of authority in my household for many years. It is not that he so much dominated my mother, which he did, but he acted independently of her. I never once saw him consult with her about anything. He did not ask for her advice or opinions, rather forced his opinions on her. He acted on his own. He was erratic in his actions, which was most evident when he kidnapped her at gunpoint only because she wanted a divorce. Growing up, I saw he was impulsive, spur of the moment, and did not care what she had to say, or for that matter, what she felt. I could add much more, but I believe the things I've stated to you as clearly and precisely as I can. I am deeply concerned about the physical and emotional toll that this is taking on her. Would you please consider the lowest sentence of 21 months so she can come home and we can begin to heal together from the pain he caused us? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
That concludes the testimonial part of it, Your Honor. If I could make a brief argument about the sentencing at this time, I would like to do.
Do you want to do that now, or do you want to do it at the conclusion of the state's case?
You know, that's fine. If you wanted to, in other words, you're suggesting just let the state present their testimony and then we can do. Oh, yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
And you may have anything you want to add after the state's.
I think that's fine. Thank you, Your Honor.
Very good. Mr. Fuchs?
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, I put that picture up now because I want to remind why we're here. We are here because Mike Williams is dead. And we are here because Mike Williams is dead because of what Miss Denise Williams has been convicted of doing, and that is a conspiracy to commit murder that ended in his death. That's why we're here. We are here because Miss Cheryl lost her son. We are here because his brother lost a brother. And during this process, we're here because Ainsley lost a father, and she also lost Mike Williams' entire side of the family because of the actions of Denise Williams. Now, Ms. Cheryl Williams would like to talk to the court, please.
All right.
Let me give this one to her. It won't reach. There's a copy. Got enough. Good.
Right here? Right here? That's probably better. That's probably better. Judge Carroll, my name is Cheryl Williams. I am the mother of Jerry Mike Williams, the young man who was murdered on December 16th, 2000. Judge Carroll, I am here today to ask you to deny Denise Williams' request to reduce her prison time for the charge of conspiracy to commit murder. Nick, Mike's brother, and I last saw Mike on Thursday night, December 14th. He and Denise told us that they were ready to have their second child. Mike was very happy. He wanted his daughter, Ainsley, 18 months old, to have a brother or sister. Mike also told us that he and Denise were going to Apalachicola to celebrate their upcoming 6th wedding anniversary. They would leave on Saturday as soon as he and Brian Winchester got back from duck hunting at noon. I talked to Mike on Friday. He told me he was going to play Santa Claus and ring the bell for the Salvation Army as part of his Rotary Club duties. Then he, Denise, Brian and Kathy, Ainsley and Stafford were going to the Christmas pageant in Thomasville. He would call me when he got back from hunting on Saturday. Judge Carroll, I never got that call. Instead, Denise called Nick at 3:00 p.m. to tell him that Mike was missing. He didn't come home from hunting. Her father and a friend had driven to Lake Seminole and found Mike's truck and boat trailer. There was no sign of Mike or his boat. Denise told Nick that Mike had gone hunting by himself because Brian had called at 3:00 a.m. to cancel. Judge Carroll, what none of us knew at the time was that Denise and Brian had been having an affair for years. For months, she and Brian had been planning to murder Mike. They were going to make it look like an accident. Even though Denise didn't love Mike, she didn't want a divorce. A divorce would have ruined her social reputation.
She didn't want Ansley to be old enough to remember Mike, and she wanted to collect a $500,000 life insurance policy before it lapsed. Judge Carroll, Mike loved Denise. She allowed him to go hunting on their anniversary, knowing that her lover was going to kill him. All of her problems were solved. December 16th, 2000, my life as I knew it changed forever. There is no How to Find Your Missing Child manual available to help mothers in their search for lost children. I did what God told me to do. I wanted publicity. Denise did not. I wanted a criminal investigation. Denise did not. I begged Fish and Game to get the local law enforcement to do a criminal investigation. They told me Mike had fallen out of his boat and drowned and had been eaten by alligators. I knew this wasn't true because alligators hibernate in cold water. They don't eat. Mike's body was never found in Lake Seminole. Denise had Mike declared dead 6 months after he disappeared. She collected almost $2 million in life insurance money. I worked in my home daycare from 5 o'clock a.m. to 6 o'clock p.m. Then I would go out and put up missing person signs with Mike's picture on them. I made a big poster sign and walked the streets of Leon County asking everyone to help me find Mike. I wrote thousands of letters to the media and politicians begging them to help me find my son. I put ads in the Tallahassee Democrat, and I put up billboards trying to find Mike. Judge Carroll, I stood in front of the churches where Brian, Denise, and their families attended. I was holding my big poster on the public sidewalk in front of the churches. The ministers and other members of the churches would cuss me out and tell me to leave. I did not leave. I was told by law enforcement officers that I was crazy. According to them, Mike was eaten by alligators. I didn't do things the right way. I wrote too many letters. I talked too much. They told me to go home and shut up. I did not. After 9 months after Mike's disappearance, he was included in a Tallahassee Democrat article about locally missing persons. When Denise read it, she was furious. She called me and Nick to her house. She told us that she never wanted to see Mike's picture again. She never wanted to hear his name again. She had to get on with her life. She told me that if I continued to try and get a criminal investigation, that I would lose Ansley, my granddaughter, Mike's only child. Judge Carroll, I am a fighter, not a victim. When Denise threatened to take Ansley, I knew it was because she was hiding something. I knew that she knew where Mike was or what happened to him. I love Ansley, but Mike was my son. If I had not done what I did for 17 years, no one would have questioned the alligator theory. It took me 3.5 years to get a criminal investigation. When Denise found out about it, she went through with her threat and took Ansley away from me and Nick. Judge Carroll, my granddaughter was raised by 2 murderers while being denied the love and support of her father's family. She does not know her aunts, her uncles, cousins, or me, her grandmama. Denise told her that we were bad people and that I was crazy. We haven't seen her in 17 years. Denise not only killed my son, she stole my granddaughter. Ansley believes her mother is innocent. For 20 years, Denise, Brian, and the Merrill family manipulated my granddaughter's mind. This is evident in Ansley's support of Denise. She was totally brainwashed. Ansley is a bright, beautiful young woman who was sadly told her whole life that her grandmama Cheryl was crazy and would hurt her. But I am the only one who has never hurt her. I not only sought justice for her father, but justice for her. I pray one day she will be out from under the generational curse her mother bestowed on her. When Ansley is ready, the truth is waiting on her. It is compiled in testimonies and countless evidence that Denise is not capable of loving anyone but herself. She has proved this time and time again. When I found out on December 20th, 2017, that Mike's body had been found and that he had been murdered, part of me died too. For 17 years, I had hoped that my son was alive and would eventually come home. Now, that hope was dead too. The coroner sent me a message. Miss Williams, don't worry, Mike didn't suffer when he died. I disagree. What about the time he's trying to get out of his waders in the freezing waters of Lake Seminole? What about the time he's clinging to a stump in the dark, knowing his best friend whom he loved is going to kill him? Mike suffered horribly. For the rest of my life, when I try to go to sleep, I will see my son clinging to a stump, freezing, wondering why his friend is trying to kill him. I hear him screaming for help. I wasn't there to help him. It will haunt me forever. Judge Carroll, please don't reduce Denise's prison time even by 1 day. Please don't show her any mercy. She didn't show my son any mercy. She took him away from his daughter, his family, and his friends. For 17 years, Denise traveled the world spending Mike's insurance money while his dead body was crammed into a muddy hole on the lake car. When his body was found, he was still wearing his wedding ring. Denise took Ansley's father away from her, and she took him away from his family. Then she took Ansley away from me and Nick. Judge Carroll, if you will make Denise serve every minute of her 30-year prison sentence for conspiracy to commit murder, then and only then will I believe justice has been served for my son, Mike Williams. Thank you.
You don't want to address the court, do you? Your Honor, we've heard from people in support of Ms. Williams, and I understand that. But keep in mind, and you go back to the testimony that came out during the course of the trial, Brian Winchester discussed how she had an alter ego. She went by the name Meridian. There was even evidence about the necklace that was bought with the Meridian name on it. Your Honor, there's a book called The New Land. In it, there's a quote, "I see no evil because love is blind." I have no doubts that these people saw what it is that Denise Williams wanted them to see. But these people clearly never met Meridian. We heard that she was a devoted mother, except for the fact it completely ignores the evidence that was presented during the course of the trial regarding the conspiracy to commit murder of Ainsley's father. It ignores the threats that came out from Meridian, that if Ms. Cheryl continued to seek media attention and justice for Mike, that she'd never see her daughter again. It ignores the fact that over that entire time period, Ms. Cheryl has not seen her granddaughter. Meridian stood up here, or Denise Williams stood up here and said, wrote down, Nothing I can do can give his daughter back her father. What about the grandma? What about the aunt? What about the uncle? Miss Cheryl, Nick, and the Williams family faced ridicule all these years by the friends and family members of Denise Williams about how crazy she was to believe that Mike had been killed. She was right. For 17 years, she was correct while she took the ridicule. Yet Cheryl is going to stand here and say, I can't do anything to give back her father. What has she done to try and give back the grandmother and the side of Denise's family? Mike's family. You know, I watched her up here. There's a term called crocodile tears. I think in this situation, alligator tears may be more appropriate wording. They turned on, they turned off during her statement. Your Honor, this is a lady that stood up here and was able to cry at the appropriate times when she addressed Your Honor. We had a bond hearing in here, and I know Your Honor has reviewed all these things. We had a bond hearing here in the courtroom right after she had been arrested. In that bond hearing, the state elected to play the statement of Brian Winchester. If you were to believe, and if everybody else is to believe, that she knew nothing about what transpired on Lake Seminole or Carr Lake, that would have been the very first time she ever heard what happened to Mike, her beloved husband. We played it. Brian Winchester discussed ad nauseum what went into that particular evening, or the morning, that ended in Mike's death. He went into the fact that he was there at the boat and tried to knock Mike over and have him drown his waders, which didn't work. And then ultimately shot him in the face. And that would have been the first time she ever heard it. Where were the tears then? Where was the reaction then? This is the first time you've heard how your beloved husband was murdered? No reaction? Yet when she's before a court, she's able to have him. I see no evil because love is blind. Your Honor, the jury of her peers is not. The jury of the peers went through and listened to the evidence and made the determination that they did. And what they saw was Meridian. They saw the photos of Meridian having a threesome with Brian Winchester, her co-conspirator, and his wife before Mike's death. Those are in evidence. Those are photographic evidence of her being a cheating wife. Mike was worried about her cheating before his death. He was debating about leaving her and taking Ainsley. There was $3,000 missing one weekend from their account that Denise's excuse was she was buying weed. Your Honor's been doing this a long time. $3,000 worth of weed is a lot of weed, especially back then, 20 years ago. Yet this is the person of good character that we've heard from? Or is it simply that love is blind? Good character aren't people that take granddaughters away from grandmothers. Good people aren't the ones cheating on their beloved spouse. Good people certainly aren't people that conspire in the murder of their beloved husband. Good people aren't ones that file for an insurance claim 16 days after Mike Williams went missing, while literally all of his friends and family are still on the lake looking for him. It wasn't an emergency funding situation. She was a CPA. They had plenty of money in the account. What they saw was Denise Williams. They never saw Meridian. Meridian is responsible and before you in court today for sentencing. There are arguments in the pre-sentence investigation, I'm sorry, not in the sentencing memorandum put forth by the defense. I'd like to go into some of those things. They asked for the sentencing mitigator that Meridian was a minor participant in this. Absolutely not. No question the DCA has stated there's a legally she had a minor role in the actual murder. But they did state that her role was sufficient as it relates to the conspiracy to commit murder. Most importantly, the jurors of her peers that heard all of the evidence didn't think her role was minor. And they returned a verdict appropriately. Now, the DCA said that she played only a minor role, and certainly that is going to be the argument of defense counsel. Your Honor, the testimony during the course of the trial, Brian Winchester, that they had talked about this plan on how it is that they were going to commit this murder for over a year. There were multiple different ways they were going to do it. Were they going to do a boating accident offshore where both Kathy and Mike went missing and miraculously Denise and Brian Winchester survived? They even talked about the night before how they were going to set up their alibis with Denise's help. Meridian suggested to Brian that he give her a certain medicine that Kathy takes. Kathy, of course, was Brian Winchester's wife at the time. Because when you combine that with alcohol, it knocks her out cold. And the alibi was to be that Brian was home asleep during the time of this and woke up and went hunting with his father-in-law. So she's actively participating in the drugs to give Kathy to make sure she's sedated sufficiently to set up the alibi. Brian Winchester talked about the roles and the alibis and how they were going to establish the alibis, that Denise was going to stay at home and call her sisters after a certain amount of time to show that she was in fact at home this entire time and didn't have any play in it. She talks about the anniversary. Your Honor, this hunting trip happened on their anniversary. I understand Mike Williams is an avid duck hunter. And I know duck hunters are duck hunters and they go when it's duck hunting season. But there is not a person in this world that can do anything on their anniversary without getting permission from their spouse and significant other. Doesn't happen. That conversation in every household across America is, okay, well, what time are you going to be back? Because we've got to go back on this trip later on this evening because they were going to Appalachia. Who are you going hunting with? Yet when law enforcement goes missing, Meridian never tells law enforcement, oh, by the way, he went hunting with Brian Winchester. Most importantly, Brian Winchester said her role was to make sure that Mike went hunting on that day. I can't stress this enough. If Mike doesn't go hunting with Denise's permission, he is not dead. For him to be dead on that day, he has to be shot by Brian Winchester, but most importantly, he has to be there. Brian Winchester can't shoot him, he's not there. That is not a minor participation. That is an active participation in the conspiracy that ultimately led to his death. Argument was in there that Brian had to encourage her after she had cold feet. It's debatable whether that's really the way it was stated. They had a conversation afterwards that reinstated it for the following year, but She's here because of what she conspired to do before that date. The sentencing we're talking about is conspiracy that was prior to that date and, of course, afterwards as well. There's an argument repeatedly in appeals and everything regarding disparity in the cases in the sentencing. Apparently that's only good when it fits their suit, when it fits their argument. Because now they're sitting there arguing for her to be let loose at 22 months prison. How is that even remotely comparative as to the sentences that have been imposed? Brian Winchester was serving 20 years in the Department of Corrections, followed by 10 years probation. The argument is Brian got less. Your Honor, there actually is a statutory mitigating circumstance regarding him. He cooperated with state to resolve a current offense and other offenses that were, quite frankly, unsolvable. Meridian had the same opportunity for 17 years to do so. She talks about the duress and the fact of the incident that happened up in Atlanta. Yet somehow that didn't trigger her to say, hey, maybe this is the guy, if she doesn't believe that Brian Winchester is the guy that committed this murder like she so claimed for so long. Never said, oh, this guy came at us with a gun. Maybe he did do something, like the rumors have been circulating around this community for all those 17 years that she never ran from. What about when he put a gun to her head and kidnapped her on that day? She was brought there and given the opportunity to talk to and asked repeatedly about this situation. Her brother-in-law was there saying, how can you possibly say he didn't do this when he just did and held a gun to your head with all the situations? Get her answer? I don't want to talk about that right now. Is that because she didn't know he didn't do it and she didn't have a role? Or is it because that is the pact that her and Brian Winchester had? That no matter what happened, they would never tell the roles of the other person. Is that why she was so surprised when she found out that Marcus Winchester knew of the murder, and when she was flat out accused of being a murderer herself by her friend? We heard from her friend that said that she was not the same person after Mike was killed, went missing. She was withdrawn and quiet. Is it because she missed Mike? Or is it because she knew what she had done resulted in his death and murder? There is no evil because love is blind. Or do we look at the facts? And we look at the facts of the insurance policy immediately afterwards. Do we look at the cheating on him beforehand? Do we look at the fact that Brian Winchester, or Mike Williams was ready to leave her after she'd taken $3,000 from her account? Do we look at the fact that she took the daughter away from her grandmother under threat to make sure there wasn't a situation or a investigation? Do we look at the facts that clearly showed Meridian was in fact involved in the conspiracy to commit this murder, and leave aside what Denise Williams wanted everybody to see? As I said, they had a pact they wouldn't tell. When she is accused of murder, her only concern is that Marcus Winchester knew about it.
Brian told me that y'all planned it.
Planned what?
showed up at the shop later that afternoon, you know, telling me how I would have to take this to my grave, that it would ruin Stafford's life, it would ruin, you know, apparently Brian told Marcus that he had talked to me, and he went on to just tell me, Marcus went on to tell me how my life would be ruined, how I would never be able to start over, if Stafford's life was ruined, if...
So Marcus knew?
Hey Denise, I've been a friend of yours for 20 years. I know you just committed murder. You're involved in the murder of your husband, Mike Williams. Wait, Marcus knew? That's your concern? Is that the mark of a good character and all the things we've heard about? Or is that Meridian? Worried about the pact that was kept between her and Brian Winchester. And as far as that pact goes,
Well, I mean, I know that you know something, Denise, because whenever I was going out to see Marcus, you're like, tell Marcus to tell Brian I'm not talking.
Yeah.
And I knew what that meant.
tell Marcus to tell Brian that I'm not talking. Your Honor, if she's not involved in the conspiracy, and she's not involved in everything else like that, they're claiming she wasn't, what is the purpose of that conversation? Or is that conversation consistent, again, with what we know Meridian and what the jury's determined Meridian had done?
Part of the plan was that I wanted Kathy to basically be as drunk as possible the night before because I wanted her to sleep late the next morning. My alibi, the plan was that all of this would occur very early in the morning, and I would have time enough to get back and meet my father-in-law up near I-10 and Thomasville Road to actually go on a hunting trip with him. So that was going to be my cover, going to be my alibi. Her alibi was going to be that she was at home with Ansley. And the plan was when Mike didn't come back home that eventually she was going to start calling her sisters and her dad from her house phone so that she could establish that she was at the house, prove that she was at the house with Ansley.
So what was the plan? What happened?
So Kathy and I went out and went to the concert, got home late. She did have a lot to drink. There was discussion between me and Denise, and I can't remember if I actually did this or not, or if I did it the week prior, or I just really can't remember, but I remember Denise and I talking about there was some medication. There was some medication that Kathy had. And we talked about giving her a little bit of that medication that would cause her to sleep really heavy and make sure that she slept really good through all of it, because I didn't want her to wake up and realize how early, I didn't want her to know how early I was leaving the next morning. So the plan with Mike was that I would meet him at a gas station on Thomasville Road up near the overpass. Well, the overpass I don't think was there at that point, but meet him up at a gas station up near the McDonald's up there. And I met him there. I had told him that we were going to go to a secret special spot to go hunting. And that he needed to bring his waders. I have to make sure that he brought his waders because the belief there was kind of like there still is probably like a duck hunter's myth that if you fall overboard with your waders, you're going to sink really quick and drown. So I had to make sure that he brought the waders. And so I told him about this, great spot that we were going to go, and he needed to bring his waders. So I met him at the gas station, and I told him when he drove up, I was real paranoid about phones and him calling me and there being a record of him calling me. So I told him that my battery was dead on my phone, that there was no reason for him to call me as we were driving over to the lake, because normally we would have called and talked to each other on the phone or even ridden together. I don't even remember how or why I told him that I needed to use my vehicle instead of just going in his, but somehow I came up with some reason to do that.
You said you called him and tried to get him to make sure he was going to get the waiters. When did you call him? Talk about that?
I don't remember specifically. We talked several times. Mike and I talked every day ourselves. So we talked about hunting all the time. And we talked about this trip several times prior to it happening. So I followed him over to the lake. He had his boat behind his Bronco. I followed him in my white Suburban. Lake Seminole, which is about 50 minutes away. And I told him what landing we needed to go to. And so we pulled into the landing and launched the boat. And I said something, I had to make sure that he had the waders on, so I said something about we're running low on time, or we're going to be really pushed. And
why was it so important for the waders to be on?
Because I believed and we believed that if you fell overboard with the waders on, that you would sink pretty quickly. So I told him something like, we're running late, we need to go ahead and put our waders on, here and now, before we get in and go. And so we both did that. And because I knew where we were going hunting, I was in the back of the boat driving, and he was in the front.
What kind of boat are we talking about? Like an airboat, or what were we talking about?
It was what's called a canoe. It's basically a canoe that has a flat back that you can put a small motor on the back of it.
I'm familiar with canoes. Canoes can be a little tipsy.
This boat was, yes, basically like a canoe, so pretty tippy.
Okay. So you had to put a little water in your head now. You're driving.
Yes, sir. I was driving, and I know I was very concerned about the time. Everything had taken longer than what I had anticipated, and I had to be back in town early enough in time to meet my father-in-law for my alibi trip to occur. And so we headed out, and there was a deep area, maybe a couple hundred yards from the landing that we put in at. And we got to that area that I knew was a deep area, and I don't remember exactly how I got him to stand up, but I don't know if I pretended something was wrong with the motor or the weight in the boat was off or something, but I basically stopped the boat and got him to stand up, and when he did, I pushed him into the water.
What happened next?
So he was in the water, and he was like struggling, and the motor of the boat was still running, and I pulled off just a little bit to get kind of away from him so that he couldn't reach back into the boat. And I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know if he was trying to swim or I didn't know what was going on, but what I came to find out or eventually realized was he was taking the waders and the jacket off. And he got those off, and I think I forgot to tell you about this part before, but I remember now that that area of the lake had a lot of snags, a lot of dead trees that come up out of the water, and there's a lot of stumps that come up out of the water. And he swam over one of those stumps and held on to it. And he was panicking, and I was panicking, and none of this was like going well I thought it was going to go. And I didn't know what to do, but he started to yell. And I didn't know how to get out of that situation. And so I had my gun in the boat. And so I loaded my gun, and I made one or two circles around, and I ended up circling closer towards him, and he was in the water, and as I passed by, I shot him. In the head.
Your Honor, we are here because of the role that lady, Denise Williams, conspired with that man to kill Mike Williams, that ended up in his death as it was just described. That ended up in his death, as Ms. Cheryl said, with Mike clinging to a stump and begging for mercy. The argument is going to be made that this is Brian Winchester, this is Brian Winchester, this is Brian Winchester, except Brian Winchester's testimony, as the juries heard it and jury made a determination, was supported by stubs to concerts. It was supported by photographic evidence. It was supported by receipts for Meridian's necklace. It was supported by love letters from Denise Williams to Brian Winchester. It's not just Brian Winchester's testimony. He explained everything, but it's supported by everything else. The argument's been made regarding the betrayal of a friend that ended up in the shooting. Proportionate sentencing. Which is the bigger betrayal? The friend or the wife and friend of marriage? I would certainly argue that a betrayal of his wife and his friend and the mother of his child is far greater than the betrayal even of the person that actually shot him, because she's the one. If she doesn't cheat on Mike with Brian Winchester, we don't go down this road. If she doesn't give permission on their anniversary for him to go hunting, we're not here. She's the one that set all of this in motion. That's what the evidence has shown. And she's the reason that he laid underneath Carr Lake with his wedding ring on, deteriorating, and was ultimately found, and justice was served by the verdict of the jurors almost on the exact anniversary of his death, 18 years later. And Your Honor, we are asking you that you continue to have justice served by sentencing Ms. Williams, Meridian, to 30 years in the Department of Corrections. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Most of what you heard from the prosecution here is a rehash of the case. A little bit of the bond hearing testimony from hearsay testimony at the bond hearing from Brian Winchester, little snippets of the most favorable direct examination during trial. There's a lot of it that I can take issue with. You know, just as an example, the love letter he's talking about was written 4 years after Mike disappeared. It doesn't show that they were having an affair at the time, but there's a lot of putting little bits and pieces together like that. And my question, though, is why are we retrying the case here? The jury found Ms. Williams guilty of conspiracy. That is a fact that I have to deal with. That is a fact that you have to deal with. And just to dredge up all of the things that happened at trial doesn't really answer the question. Now, Mr. Fuchs did talk about sentencing. As best I can tell, his sentencing theory is that this crime was actually committed by somebody else, somebody named Meridian. He said that over and over again. And I'm sitting there thinking, why is he saying that? And then it dawned on me. He has to make her out to be some monster that she isn't in order to get the sentence that he wants. He knows that if you look at her record, if you see her for what she is, if you see her family for what she is, the sentence he's asking for isn't even remotely justifiable. And so he pretends that this isn't Denise Williams, this is some fictional character named Meridian. Judge, we've had enough of that. This case has been infected with all kinds of misinformation and disinformation in social media. And I'm just asking you to get beyond the fantasy here and see Ms. Williams for who she is and what she is. Now, I want to make a few comments in mitigation here, but first I want to put this case in a broader context. Denise Williams was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder on the testimony of Brian Winchester, the man who committed the murder. The state gave Brian immunity for his testimony against Denise. He agreed to give that testimony while he was in custody facing a life sentence for kidnapping Denise at gunpoint. He has never served a day in prison for murdering Mike Williams. He has never served a day in prison for the conspiracy to murder Mike Williams. And now Denise Williams is the only person here who can answer for the crime, the only person who can possibly satisfy Cheryl Williams's grief. That's not fair. I think the way this case was handled, in fact, the way it even came to be a case in the first place, should be very troubling. It is very troubling to me. It doesn't change the fact that you have to sentence her. I know that. I understand that. But I think that these basic facts about how this case came to be and the relationship of these parties has a bearing on the sentence, the just sentence that you should impose. Now, as you know, the lowest permissible sentence under these sentencing guidelines or the criminal punishment code is 21 months. In our sentencing memorandum, we outlined 4 mitigating factors. I'm not going to go over them in detail here because I know you've read that, but I do want to make a brief comment about each one of those to add a few points about the mitigators. The first one, and I think the most important one because it's a statutory mitigator, is that she had a relatively minor role. All those people out there in the land of Facebook and Twitter who think she masterminded this, that is simply no evidence of that. None. We have to go by the facts. This is a court of law, and we have to look at the facts. And the facts were outlined by the First District Court of Appeal in their opinion. They started out their opinion by saying that, you know, it takes very little to convict somebody of conspiracy. And I think you know that from your own experience. It doesn't take a whole lot. And then they went on to say, in fact, she actually she had very little involvement, as a matter of fact. Here are some direct quotes from the court's opinion. This is the court speaking. This is not me as an advocate. This is the court. Brian never testified about anything Denise did or said to incite or encourage him to commit the murder. He planned a lot of it. He instigated a lot of it. Certainly, there was no evidence that Denise concocted the plan or enlisted Brian to murder Mike. I would ask you just to think about how those objective comments by a court reviewing this evidence line up with what Mr. Fuchs just said. And then the final thing the court said, notably Denise at one point was getting cold feet about the idea, and Brian had to encourage her to be on board before he would move forward with the plan. So you get the clear picture from the court opinion that she was a relatively minor participant in Brian Winchester's plan to kill Mike Williams. Now, I think the most, and I think the important thing about this is that it's a statutory mitigator. It's not just a lawyer coming up here with some excuse, oh, he had a hard childhood, he wet the bed when he was a kid or something. This is serious. This is what the legislature, the Florida legislature says is a statutory mitigating circumstance, one that a court could consider to go below the lowest permissible sentence. Now, I know you can't do that. She's already served twice that much time. But I make the point only to say that it's a very important mitigator, one that's recognized by the legislature. Now, one more comment about her involvement. I think one of the most telling facts about her involvement, or the degree of her involvement, is that Brian Winchester testified that he never told Denise that he shot Mike Williams. He never told her. To this day, Your Honor, Brian Winchester has never told her that. So the question I have, how involved could she have been if he went out and did this and didn't even bother to tell her? It makes me wonder whether she was involved at all. And I know you and I are beyond that point right now, but I think it's something that we have to think about. There are some non-statutory mitigators too, and I've been careful to point out in my sentencing memorandum that these are all non-statutory mitigators that have been recognized in the case law. And the first of these is that the defendant has been an exemplary inmate. I don't think there's any question about that. You know from the letter that you got from Ruthie Westfall from the Department of Corrections, you've got people inside the Department of Corrections saying, this is not Meridian. This is Denise Williams, a person who's done all these good things in prison. She started this. She had been very involved in this JOY program, which Ms. Westfall outlined. She literally started a GED program in the women's prison, was taught 20 other women on the way to their GED, and I'm informed that one of them actually did get a GED. She teaches other inmates how to play the piano. So, Judge, this is not Meridian. This is Denise Williams, a good person. And I think the thing that is the most telling thing about her activities in the prison is that she did all of this when she was facing a sentence of life without parole. Down at the DOC, they call those ladies toe taggers. The only way they're getting out is in a box with a tag on the toe. That's what she thought she was when she did all of this. Now, what does that say about her character? It says that she's going to try to do good things, try to make the best of her life, no matter what her circumstance is. Now, another mitigating factor is that, and it's been recognized in the case law, is that the court does have the opportunity to try to even out the disparity in the punishment. And let me correct something right now about this. Brian Winchester got 20 years. He didn't get a day for this murder. He got 20 years for kidnapping Denise Williams at gunpoint. So that doesn't factor into this at all. The disparity I'm talking about is the fact that the state now seeks to punish Denise for her minimal role in a conspiracy when they've effectively pardoned the guy who committed the crime. I hope that I'm not the only person in this room who thinks that's unfair. Now, I know you can't iron this disparity out. It's impossible, but it's only impossible because the state decided to handle the case this way. But I think at the very least you can consider that as a point of leniency, and our case law says it is a legitimate point for you to consider. Now you have other, you have two others that I'll talk about collectively, that she's a good parent. You know that from the previous letter that her daughter wrote to Judge Hankinson before the first sentencing, went on to explain all of the virtues that Denise instilled in her, and what a good person she thought she was. And then you have numerous character letters, and you have had character testimony here today tell you, and you know, I don't think all these people who came up here and testified or who wrote letters are naive people who think that Denise is actually somebody other than who she is. I'll let you decide that. I mean, I don't think that's a reasonable argument. Let me say that I think you should be especially careful in considering the testimony of Denise's daughter. She is also Mike Williams' daughter, and that makes her, by law, the closest relative of the victim. Now, the citizens of Florida, when they adopted Marcy's law in our Constitution, made it clear that they want the prosecution and the court system to pay careful attention to the rights and the obligation, the rights and the wishes of victims. And let me just say, she has been completely ignored through this whole proceeding. I don't know if the victim advocate ever talked to her. But my point here is that her opinion is as important, if not more important, than any other victim. It's not less important just because it doesn't line up with the state's narrative about the case. Marcy's law doesn't say you pay attention to the victim only when the state agrees with the victim. So I ask you to give careful consideration to that. Now let me say another thing about one other thing about this before I close this presentation here. I understand, I'm reluctant to say this, that I understand Cheryl Williams' pain. I can't really say that. I've never been in that situation. But I try to imagine how horrible it would be, and I concede that it is truly horrible. But if she's angry, she should be angry at Brian Winchester, the man who killed her son. If she's angry, she should be angry with the state attorney for deciding to pardon the man who killed her son. Mr. Fuchs gets up here and says, oh, makes it look like it was practically all Denise's deal. We know that's not correct from reading the court opinion. It's just not correct. And I mean, I don't know. I think this is just very troublesome when you have a situation where now, what are we doing now? We're trying to punish a person who talked to somebody about committing a crime when the person who committed the crime is not serving a day in prison? I mean, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't make any sense to me, Your Honor. Now, let me just close what I have to say about the sentencing guidelines. Oh, let me back up. I did miss one thing I wanted to say. In reference to the involvement, you know, Mr. Fuchs made a point, he made a point numerous times about how Denise gave Mike permission to go hunting that day, and that therefore she was involved in this murder. Your Honor, there is no evidence in the record anywhere that Denise gave him permission to go hunting that day. This was a point that was argued out ad nauseum in the First District Court of Appeal, and the state couldn't come up with a single line of testimony to support that argument. So it's just not true. Let me just close by saying that I think that there's a point to having these sentencing guidelines. I didn't make them. They were made by the Florida legislature. It's not, you're not just a lawyer here advocating for a client. This is the law. I don't make it up. The score in this case is what the score is. It's 21 months. Now, the state asks for 30 years. Judge, I just have to say, I think that's outrageous. Why would you sentence a first offender to the maximum sentence? If you're going to do that, what kind of a sentence would you reserve for somebody who had a long criminal record? What kind of a sentence would you reserve for some real horrible gang member who was a real nasty person? I mean, it's unthinkable. I really think what they're trying to do is to maybe say, well, okay, well, I'll split the difference and give her 15. And that's going to be way too high, in my opinion. But I just have to say, I think the guidelines are the guidelines. And I would just say this. The minimum sentence of 21 months exists for some person. It exists for some person in the universe. If it doesn't exist for a person like this, Your Honor, then who does it exist for? I mean, you're an experienced trial judge. I know you've seen a lot of people come before you. I would just ask you to make that judgment yourself. Well, of course you will. I mean, not magnanimous of me to say that. I don't mean to infringe on that, but I'm just asking you to use your own judgment to say, well, if this minimum sentence that the legislature has told us exists for this person or for a person, if this isn't the person, who is? I thank you for your careful attention to all of this, Your Honor. Thank you.
Your Honor, I do have one comment regarding what Marcy's law and the facts that were represented by Mr. Padovano are absolutely 100% incorrect as it relates to Ainsley. The state attorney's office reached out to her through her counsel and said we were willing to sit down, as well as beforehand we reached out to family members that we were willing to talk to her.
Mr. Padovano.
Well, I was just going to say, I thought your order was that...
No, you get the last word on anything of merit, and he had a little bit of legal thing he wanted to raise, and I'm okay with that.
He did last week agree to speak with Ainsley, only after Mr. Harrison wrote a letter invoking...
I'm not all particularly concerned about that right now.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to
say?
say?
No, sir, I've said everything I need to say.
Mr. Wade, did you want to say anything?
No, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
Anything else anybody wanted to offer as far as being heard before the court imposes sentence?
No, Your Honor.
Well, I'm going to take a few minutes and go out and recollect my thoughts. Plan on it being about 10 minutes. That'll give me time to outline what I want to do, and we'll come back in. We'll be in recess for a few minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything else anybody wanted to say before I proceed?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Well, before I start, I do want to address everybody. I am about to pronounce sentence here, and if anybody on either side feels that they can't comport to courtroom behavior beforehand, I just simply ask that you leave now. I don't know of any judge that looks forward to handling a sentencing, and it, at least for me, never gets easy, and frankly, I hope I never get to the point that it does. I do want to explain what I'm about to do here a little bit. Normally, I try not to say too much on the bench, and I got a picture of Will Rogers here on my bench book saying never miss a good chance to shut up, and I try to follow that. But I think it's important to talk to everybody here today, because I did read all of the letters from family, friends, and on both sides, and I do not doubt the sincerity of a one of them. From the Williams side, they all indicate that Ms. Williams was a good person, a mother, and a solid friend, and that they can't square why we're here with the person that they know. We have had some discussion about what went on, and you know, you can't really do the sentencing without having an appreciation for why we're here. And I have gone through and I read and reviewed the transcripts in the file and the holding of the first district, but you know, the evidentiary portion of this conviction has already been sustained, and the summary of it is pretty straightforward and to the point, and the evidence shows that Denise and Brian had an agreement to kill Mike, and that Denise intended for Brian to kill Mike. The first district in their summary noted that it showed they discussed alternative methods of killing Mike, and that Denise squashed the plans that she thought were too risky. That after she called off the first planned hunting trip, Brian met with her to see if she still wanted to go through with the murder. He did not want to stage the accident if Denise was wishy-washy. She again agreed that they should proceed. There could be no doubt that at a minimum, the multiple meetings between Brian and Denise to discuss the plans for the murder made it more likely that the murder would actually occur. And the court noted this increased likelihood is precisely the public danger that conspiracy statutes seek to mitigate. There was also evidence that Ms. Williams intended for the murder to actually happen when she entered into the agreement with Brian. The evidence was certainly enough to establish that it was her intent to engage in concerted criminal activity to support a conviction for conspiracy, her payment of the extra insurance premium to extend his life insurance policy, her agreement to come up with an alibi, and her preference for one plan over another all circumstantially showed her intent to participate in a conspiracy and to see that its objective was accomplished. The court also commented on her actions after his murder, which provided accompanying circumstances from which the jury could infer her involvement in the conspiracy. She tried to use the promise of visitation with her daughter as an incentive to stop Cheryl's campaign to reopen the criminal investigation. And after Brian's arrest, she conveyed a message to Brian's father that she was not talking. I don't find that she was a relatively minor participant in the conspiracy that killed Mike Williams. I would like to comment that there is a problem here in that the state of Florida had to make a deal with the devil to bring Mike Williams' body home, and it was a pragmatic decision that they had to do. And this court is not capable of giving perfect justice here today. Mr. Winchester is not before me. But the truth is that Ms. Williams could have stopped this on December 16th as she had done before. When Mike Williams left the house that morning, Ms. Williams knew three things: that if things went as planned, he wasn't coming back. She wasn't going to have to go to Apalachicola on the anniversary trip, and there was $1.75 million or so in insurance that her co-conspirator had helped her to obtain. This is a sad case. This case is a tragedy. This case is a waste, and it didn't have to happen. Ms. Williams, having been previously found guilty by a jury as to count one conspiracy, and having already been adjudicated guilty of that count by Judge Hankinson, I now find that it is the judgment of the law and the sentence of this court that you be committed to the Department of Corrections to be imprisoned for a term of 30 years. This sentence will be with credit for time served to date, and I believe would be nunc pro tunc to the original sentencing date of February 6, 2019. Court costs are there's a $2,100 fine, the $105 surcharge, and the $420 in court costs. You would have 30 days from this date within which to appeal the sentence and judgment of the court, and if you could not afford a lawyer, one would be appointed to represent you on any appeal. Counsel, have I left anything outstanding?
No, Your Honor.
No, sir.
All right. Ms. Williams, do you understand the sentence that I've imposed?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll be in recess.
She's upstairs.
Yes, sir.
She's upstairs.